Welcome to Bigfoot Society. If you have Bigfoot activity to report from the same areas discussed in this episode, please reach out to me directly after this episode. And if you'd like to be on the podcast to discuss a personal Bigfoot encounter, please reach out to me directly at bigfootsociety@gmail.com. Do you wish there was more Bigfoot Society to listen to every week? Well, there is now. If you become a supporting member over at Patreon, you get a special members-only episode every single week on Wednesdays, and sometimes even more episodes. Head on over to patreon.com/the Bigfoot Society. And now let's get on with the show. All right, Bigfoot Society, we've got the privilege of having Mr. Ben Freed back on the show from Bigfoot Ops out there in the great state of Washington, kind of close to the Mount Rainier area, a little bit to the west there. But welcome back to the show, Ben. How's it going?
Great, Jeremiah. Great. Thanks for having me back on again. See if we can make this interesting for you.
Absolutely.
What I can recall.
I mean, the first episode was I loved it. It was wild. I thoroughly enjoyed editing it because it was so interesting. I'll say that. But you know, Ben, I'm going to ask you some stuff right off the bat here, just so I make sure I get it in. Your area, which is Ashford, Washington, correct?
Yes.
Yes.
It's just outside the city of Ashford.
Gotcha. And it's in the area of Mount Rainier as well. Have you ever had any experiences with interactions with rangers or law enforcement regarding Bigfoot in that area?
Quite often with DNR, actually, not so much rangers because we're not in the park.
Right.
We're just basically west, and I would say more southwest of the park. But DNR, which is the Department of Natural Resources, yes, they have law enforcement out there. And just recently, matter of fact, ran into them just the other, within the last few days, because I go out there quite a lot. But the interesting encounters with them is you don't want to say too much because they ask you a lot of questions and everything. And I've never been able to get them to really, I mean, when they see us, they always talk about our research out there and they want to talk about it. They get interested, but they really don't say too much on their side.
They're holding the cards close to them, to seeing. Perhaps maybe they're even, how far are these guys, how close are these guys getting? You know, are they there yet? I don't know. It's a lot of conjecture there, but very interesting.
We've had unexplained things happen, like we were doing some testing on, we were feeding them just to see what kind of stuff they would take and what they would eat. We actually talked to the DNR ops about it, and he was asking us about it. So we told him, and we showed him where it was at and everything because he asked. And approximately, I think it was about a week and a half later, that area was logged out, and they had brought a bunch of dirt in and completely covered that area they were working on the bridge. They're putting the bridge back in, and we were trying to figure out why they would put dirt. It's almost like 2 miles away, dump the dirt in that particular spot, which was strange. We thought it was strange. And 7 out of the 7 area sites we have, they've logged 5 of them and closed off those areas. So we're pretty much tight-lipped about what we're doing with them now. We don't say too much. It can be completely coincidence. So don't get me wrong. All of a sudden you see these flags pop up in our areas. They're getting logged out. It doesn't change the Bigfoot activity, actually. It just makes it more difficult because they like to have cover and stuff like that. So it just they'll come in from a different way or whatever.
Yeah, that's it. That's extremely interesting. I mean, as you mentioned, after experiencing the potential of what that meant, I might be a little careful who I talk to as well. So even stating that, I'm realizing how much of a privilege it is to have you on this program, sharing about what you've experienced over the last 15 years, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It'll be 15 years actually in June. So
now, when I was editing our last episode, there was a thing that you had, I believe, mentioned at the end, and I want to make sure that we definitely talk about it. But you had mentioned that you've had some really interesting experiences regarding infrasound.
Hmm. I actually have equipment to test that for that out there. It's an Infra 20. I think I sent a picture of that also. It monitors infrasound. Now you can't on research wise, you can't go by weather, water, wind can affect the different sound waves, and you can pick up infrasound that way also. So, and even we're also right next to a volcano, so. But at the time, you have to relate it to any activity you're having going on with the Bigfoot or whatever. Sometimes the areas are like strangely quiet, I would say. And we'll get infrasound out there, partial parts of it, like 11 hertz, or sometimes you can get dangerous levels too, which is around 7 hertz. So, and they're just sporadic. They're not continuous, but you could have, like earthquakes, and it detects everything. So, unfortunately, you have to be really careful on your findings. You can't just say everything's a Bigfoot out there. There's a lot of environment involved in that.
Absolutely. And I think that's why I enjoy talking to an individual like yourself, because it's almost like you at times are, you're very aware of what it means to say, yeah, this was probably Bigfoot related. And you seem to be very aware of what you guys are experiencing out there, but not a Bigfoot on the brain type situation. But you just mentioned there are certain levels that you look for regarding infrasound with this device. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Well, you look, anything below 19 hertz is infrasound. So sound in here. We use it also to study their vocalizations and stuff like that, because some of their vocalizations, like the ones I think we went earlier in the earlier show with Chuck's recordings, had infrasound in the female vocal responses.
Oh,
It'll pick it up on that. So we know there's in some of their vocalizations, they do infrasound as they're calling back or whatever. We can't just say that's part of the thing, but I'm just noting that in their vocalizations, they do have some kind of infrasound in some of their vocalization. Not all the vocalizations have that, but some of theirs do.
that's interesting. When you listen to a vocalization recording like that, that includes it, is it a potential to have the same effects from listening to that recording as opposed to listening to it live?
Well, infrasound. The thing is that it affects people differently.
Right.
Like the feeling of dread and stuff people get when you get that eerie feeling the forest itself. Because Yankees notorious for that, where it's really extremely more than quiet. I mean, it's dead quiet, nothing going on. And it just gives that eerie feeling and everything. And when you pull out your handhelds, you'll sit there and have normal readings, and all of a sudden you'll start getting these partial infrasound, or you're running the other monitor. We have both. We have handhelds and that. But you'll partially get some things where it'll show 11 hertz and everything. And it's a different hertz. It can affect people differently. It can make you physically sick, give you headaches. You can start seeing things, hearing things. I like to say we actually had research out of where he thinks they were mind speaking with him, and I just kind of roll my eyes. But I've never experienced that, and anybody else out there hasn't. This one particular individual does, and he just believes in the mind speaking thing. So, but I believe that's the cause of that, because when he was actually saying he thought this was going on, I actually got readings of 11 hertz out there, which was an infrasound. And there was no planes going over at the time, or any kind of wind or anything going on. So I assume that maybe that's what it could be. He's a very intelligent person. I just don't want to think that he's crazy,
Sure.
But I tell him, I'm not experiencing anything out there on that particular level.
Okay. I think you'd mentioned as well that there's a level that could be considered dangerous.
7 hertz.
Can you talk a little bit
Long-time
about
exposure it causes disruption of the organs in your body. Now, people can look this up to see things I'm talking about, but it's a resonating frequency. It's actually pressure waves, but it can be disrupt your internal organs. It could give you a heart attack, or I don't know what the other causes could do beyond that, but physical thing. But that is one of them. I do know from my personal experience, and I'll tell you where I related to where I got interested in infrasound in the first start was because I had an incident where I was with my wife down in Charlie. I was taking a nap in the back of my RV, and I was waiting for it to get dark, and this was later in the evening. And she had heard something out there rustling around behind a big stump out there. She says, "There's something out there." She would come and woke me back up. So I kind of jumped off the back of the RV, took about 2 steps, and actually before I even actually hit the ground, I was already projectile vomiting. I mean, it was ruthless. I mean, I couldn't stop, heaving. It was just like, I threw my hands up in the air and I crawled basically back in my RV, and I sat in there for the next 12 hours, dry heaving. And it was just a terrible experience. I was like death worn over from that experience. And it lasted for 12 hours, like I said. And the next morning I was fine. No physical, lasting thing from it or whatever. I didn't have a headache or anything. It was just being sick. And then actually I went back to the next weekend. I went back out about a quarter mile away from that site. And actually, as I was doing some recordings on some vocalizations, which were owl mimicking across the road from me, it hit me again. And you don't feel it coming. You don't feel any, people talk about the getting zaps and electrical. It doesn't hit you. You just don't know. It just hits you. I just start heaving. And that lasted for about 4 hours and did the same thing to me. It just basically incapacitates you where you can't do anything.
That sounds very extreme.
It's extremely uncomfortable.
Yeah,
it's a defensive mechanism. Like I said, I tried to jump we noticed the second time. I don't know exactly what triggered that, because I was just standing there with my recording equipment, and they were actually across the road from me, which is probably a 10-foot wide dirt road, and they were in some brush right there, and I was getting some vocalizations out of there. Now, I don't know what triggered that, because I had been there for a while, but definitely the first time I jumped and I was heading in that direction where my wife had heard the sound, and it was it was probably 50 feet away. And I believe I had my phone in my hand at the time, or to take pictures or get pictures of it, or my gun. I can't remember because I was so messed up afterwards. But anyway, that was definitely, I was running towards the creature, and that's what I got from that. And it just stopped me dead in my tracks. But it was just so unique because I didn't feel any tingling, didn't feel anything. I was, like I said, literally in midair jumping off my back of my RV, and I was not sick. I've never been that sick in my life, actually. And twice within a week that happened, but I've never been that sick. But I had no indications of anything. I was completely fine. I hadn't even eaten yet, so there was no reason to be sick. But it's not like a flu symptoms. It was just projectile vomiting. So terrible experience. But that's a defensive response. I believe that the adults have. And like I said, it affects people different ways. And then the only thing I could have topped that off to was infrasound. That was the only thing it could possibly, what it could possibly be.
Has that kind of thing also happened to other members of your team as well?
No, unfortunately, they don't get out enough and do it like I do.
Gotcha.
A lot of them do their recording things. I'm more of scouting and getting out, and I was out there a lot more. Staying overnight for days at a time. So I'm out there with my wife or just me sometimes. And that's when I get affected more. They've done more stuff to me than my other groups. We're always grouped up. We've had a few encounters, and I don't know if I discussed about Delta where we walked up, we were calling them out there. I don't remember that. But anyway, as we come back from that night, we figured they were out there. We couldn't understand why we weren't getting any calls back and everything. And as we walked the road, the thing actually made a bunch of noise off to my right as we're walking up the road, and it's pitch black out there, and it shook the tree. And that's definitely an adult response, because adults always seem to let you know they're there. The juveniles don't make any sounds. Usually they're pretty quiet most of the night. You might they knock sometimes and pound on rocks or rock clack or something. But other than that, they don't do too much in response as to vocals.
I don't believe that we talked about that. That is extremely.
I kind of made a
interesting.
short version because I thought, because there was actually two. There was one behind us too, as I was second behind Chuck. He was in the lead, but I had heard something off to my right, like a little bit of brush movement. So I knew something was there, but it was dark as we were walking back, and it kind of caught Chuck off guard. But when it shook the tree, I mean, it literally shook the tree. You thought the tree just exploded out there. It was just shaking it. And like I said, it caught Chuck off guard. So he pulled his gun, which, it scared. There's just a reaction for him. But anyway, as it did it, you could actually hear it take 2 steps and stop, which is unusual for them. Normally we hear them, they just run away. It sounds like a big heavy guy, a jogger out there. They just tear off, and you hear this bipedal feet running off. This thing took 2 steps and just stood there. And I didn't even actually know what to do, because it kind of caught me off guard, because I had just turned off my thermal camera. I was going to scan it, and I said, I really didn't want to pop that thing back up there and turn it on. And I says, But when we heard the branch break behind us on the other part of the road, we thought, because they always do like to flank you. The adults do that a lot. We thought, well, it was best just to leave it alone. We're too close to this individual, because he was probably within 10 feet. We just couldn't see him in the other side of the trees. So we just kind of like, well, we'll just wander him back up to the trucks. And that's basically what we did. Because they actually caught us off guard in a bad situation. So
Is having to. Have there been other times where you've had to draw your firearms as well, or was that a pretty unique situation?
No, that was a unique situation. And like I said, we usually, because we don't go out there calling them and then, we're going to shoot them. That doesn't make sense. Like I said, we're up there trying to study them, their behaviors and everything else. So to draw our firearms, like I said, it just totally caught Chuck off guard. So. And that is basically so Chuck, we put that thing away for her, hurts all of us here. And which leads up to last year, we actually had the same kind of incident where one come in down on us on camp at Charlie, also at the West End. And that's in one of your recordings, I think I sent you there. Where it sounds like it's talking, kind of like but we had to make sure it wasn't a bear or whatever. Because it did sound bear-like, but there's no black bear going to come into camp down there where we were at. So, and I had it sent off to the state, the guy that actually used to work for state of Washington, biologist for the state of Washington. He examined that, and he said, well, that's not a bear. And I had David Ellis redo it, because we just didn't want to pop off and say this was a bear or not a bear. So we just, everybody we sent it to, we had 5 people validate that it wasn't a bear.
Which is great to get that type of response back from so many, all the people.
That was a chair incident I did talk about, though.
Yeah.
I think I was talking about, that was a chair, yeah. But see, those kind of instances, you learn things, but we don't always have our firearms on us. Like I said, most time we're standing there, we leave them in the trucks or whatever, because like I said, we're not going to go start shooting up the woods and everything. It's just for general protection, because we are dealing with things we don't completely know anything about or how they're going to respond and things. So they definitely don't like guns. So,
when I get reports from the Pacific Northwest and Southeast Alaska, I see a pattern that comes out sometimes. I'm just curious if you experience any of this in your area as well. Do you ever get any reports at all where the person will say it had qualities of like an orangutan at all?
Yeah, well, we have this discussion quite often because I'm studying their behaviors more or less than I do than the audios and stuff. And we have disagreements and stuff. But I've been out there for long. It's their cognitive thinking. They don't really have thinking beyond primates, as I say, per ape like, because we're all primates. But their problem solving skills only go to a certain level and then they stop, and they don't pursue it like a human does. Which leads me to believe that they don't have that ability. I don't know what the word I wanted to use was really hominoid or whatever would probably be something in our past, because they don't seem to have past that. It seems to be like ape-like thinking. They're smart. I would have to say they're above, a little bit above ape, but they're not quite human on their problem solving skills.
Gotcha.
I don't know if that makes sense to you.
It does.
That's what I've gathered, and that's what I'm studying, is all their behaviors and stuff like that in regards to how they react and how their thinking is. But they are smart for their environment. Like I said, that's where a lot of people get confused, because they are adapted for the forest out there, and all their abilities and everything tends to do that on their hunting skills. I mean, they're impressive. That's all I always say, is impressive on their hunting skills and stuff like that, and the way they use stealth. But that's adapted for their environment. I mean, it. I always tell them, I says, well, if they were a human, they'd probably be taking a roll of toilet paper or something else out with them out there or whatever. But in their structures that they're building, it's pretty primitive and basic.
So
a lot of people like to give them human qualities, where I disagree. I don't see any human qualities regarding that at all.
gotcha. So studying their behavior and just being out in the field for so long, are there certain things where if you experience, and outside of seeing the creature, let's say you experience or hear something or something happens, are there a few things where you'll be like, oh yeah, I'm dealing with a Bigfoot right now. That just happened.
Well, the adults, when they usually, like when I use things for adults, is that they'll sound like a bulldozer going through the brush. And you can't call everything, because that could be a giant elk coming through. I've seen elk come through there too.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to relate a lot of things to it. Is it, okay, what else besides that noise you're hearing? Like most of the time, when they make this brush noise or whatever, they'll start throwing rocks. And that's what usually gives you indications that, okay, I'm dealing with a Bigfoot, not an elk out there.
Got it.
Or you might. There's a lot of factors, because we don't like to call everything, because it's fooling yourself.
Right.
I mean, there's other creatures out there, and a lot of people like to call, say, oh, well, that's a Bigfoot, that's a Bigfoot, that's a Bigfoot, or I get the skeptical, oh, that's a deer, that's an elk, that's a squirrel, And it's easy for people to do that. When I give them recordings, they'll sit there and say there's 5 different creatures sitting right there. Oh, that's say it's a knocking sound. Well, that's a elk rubbing its deer rubbing on a tree. And that other sound there, that other knocking sound, there's a squirrel opening, cracking a nut open up on a stump. And I'll just shake your head, because they don't want to put these things all together. And then they'll sit there and say, well, I don't know what that sound is. We'll get like a raspy sound or something. And they say, well, I can't identify that. But the rest of them is definitely all these other creatures. And there are deer and elk and bear all in the same area in the same spot. It makes no sense, But again, we don't like to say everything is we have to go through a lot of stuff on our audios to make sure, we're just saying it's unknown. We know it's not a deer. We just take things off the list. Okay, that's not an elk. We know that's not a deer. That's not a coyote. That's not a cougar. I mean, there's so many different animals out there. And we get fooled every once in a while. Like a nighthawk will make sounds like a roaring sound out there. And I was totally amazed when David Elswood, they told me the nighthawk, and sure enough, that's what it was. When we went to Macaulay Library, he's really good at that stuff. So for identification, because you get a lot of misidentification. People all hear, and they can cause that too. Let me back up a little bit, because they like I said, on mimicking, on their owl mimicking, they're very, very good. It's very difficult to tell the difference between a real owl and them, and you have to relate other things going on. Sometimes we'll hear. One time I heard a vocalization, 3 vocalizations come out of the same spot. We heard a coyote, an owl, and I heard a squatch call, all in the same general area. So again, you have to really look into your stuff, and like we're doing this, so there's nobody in here we're playing these for. We just share these things. We are now with you or whatever, for people can hear these things, but there's no gain for us to hoax ourselves, or put out, well, this fooling ourselves for any kind of personal gain, because we're not writing any kind of books, we're not on the stage, we're not receiving any monetary values whatsoever. So, and all this is money that we put in, so there's no reason for us to fool one another or anybody else. So
what would it take for bless you, let's say your research continues, is there a certain point where something would happen and you could walk away satisfied and be like, okay, we got everything we need because this just happened?
Well, I've been doing for so many years. It's the getting video is the most difficult part, because they're in heavy brush and everything. And actually, we have to buy more and more equipment. Our equipment gets really, really expensive, and it gets better as we go along. So, like I said, our thermals. I had the Night Scout. We also just purchased last week a thermal drone. Which we have to, implying your tactics too. You have to change up your tactics and everything. So all this equipment costs money, but you hate putting money into something that you're not gaining anything from. Like the thermal cameras, you got several $1000s worth of thermal camera between all of us, probably closer to 50,000, and yet we haven't produced anything on those. And that's what's frustrating, but our audios, we have audio stuff all the time. They work constantly. They're always pulling in information on the audios. The game camera is another one. You try to put a lot of buy newer equipment to get, we're trying to figure out how they're doing it, by the way, to get something on those. But sometimes you get so caught up in just trying to get audios, and we put game cameras out there all the time, but you get frustrated when that equipment gets destroyed or somebody steals it or whatever. You lose a lot of money also. But it's frustrating not getting. Like I says, this year I'm more concentrated on getting the thermal imaging more than I am the audios. So does that make sense?
It does. It does. Is having a thermal drone, have you thought about how that might change your game plan when you're out in the field, how you're going to integrate that on your future research?
Well, we've had to change our tactics and stuff because they're smarter in that cognitive too. Like they change with their environment, like they're on our hunting seals, is that you have to get them to come into a certain area. Just trying to bait them up and fool them is very difficult. But the terrain itself, even the thermal cameras are not the, overall, they only see so far in there, and they can only pick up so much stuff. The thermal, and like I said, the quality people, how we have to set up stuff, because they come in from different directions. Now that the drone can cover a lot more area, but the foliage in there is really thick. So, and like I said, when you're flying over the canopies and everything, they can't always see down in that stuff. There's no thermal except for military style that's going to. And you're talking about a lot more expensive equipment trying to get those kind of, the drones like we like to have, like the Air Force and military use. It'd be great, but we don't have that kind of stuff. We don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars, drones. We're only looking at $6,000 drones. So.
Have you thought about what would be the perfect piece of evidence that you would be able to capture with this new thermal drone?
Well, the thing is that we're not. just to capture what the thermal drone is just added too, because we would what the perfect thing is to pick up the audios, the tracks. You have to have several parts of evidence if you're ever going to show anything like this. The thermal imaging is just one part, but you have the ground thermals that we're trying to catch them on. We're trying to catch them on all these things. The audio for it all, it's all evidence that not just one thing, because not one piece of evidence is not going to be compelling to people to even believe one thing or the other. If you get multiple uh, images, if we say the ground part as well as the aerial part of it, along with audios and some tracks and everything, it's more compelling. And also, you would want to get multiple. We're not looking at just trying to get just one imaging. We're trying to get over several, multiple, because we're like I said, we're watching for behaviors and stuff, and we're trying to see what they're doing out there as what we hear on our audios. That's the only thing we're trying to prove ourselves. Like with the knocking, why are they knocking? Why are they pounding on these particular rocks over here? Why do they keep on coming into this particular area? What are they doing? Is the hunting area? Things you can only speculate at is that we would like to see what they're doing. So it isn't more to show evidence that to other people that they exist or whatever. It's just to show that what we're hearing out there coincides with what we're seeing, or vice versa. Excuse me.
Absolutely. Let's imagine, let's say you have, all of a sudden, you have just unlimited resources. Are there any other pieces of equipment that you would add to the things that you have for your research in the area?
I don't know if we got anything. But it's a quality equipment. Our equipment gets old out there. Like I said, some of the stuff we use is like a 10, 12 years old, or I say 12 years old, like some of our audio equipment, but upgrading all that stuff. But we have just basically I can't even think of anything with the drone. Maybe there's other people out there, researchers come up with stuff, but I can't even think what we don't have now with buying the aerial drone. There's nothing else we don't have. I mean, there's better thermal imaging where Chuck, I think is actually he's working with another group in there they're experimenting with some thermals that are tripped out there, kind of like game cameras, and they're taking video. I don't like to talk about his stuff too much because, like I said, we all have different goals.
Sure.
As researchers out there, so his field is different than mine. We all do a combination of everything. Like I said, when I'm studying behaviors and stuff like that, and he's more into audio and the game cams. Kevin has his stuff, and like I said, it depends on what the person, who we're working with, what goals they want to set. We try to help each other get those, achieve their goals.
Exactly.
So most people. If you want to take most people, they want to go out there and just have an encounter. We do that every once in a while. We take people out there for they can have their little group encounters or whatever. Just experience the vocalizations or see them playing out there and with the game cams. I'm not game cams, but the cam lights and all that stuff. That's just we call it dinner and a show, basically what it is.
So that's interesting. So we did talk about that last time, but I don't know. I don't think that came up. You actually have seen them playing around?
Well, I've taken people out there. Actually, there was let's see, there was 5 people I've taken out there plus 2 hunters that we had picked up, because I go out there with my RV. I had a bigger RV, and I feed everybody, and we go, we let them do little experiences of going out and looking at tracks. We actually seen some Bigfoot tracks and stuff like that. We set up for the night. And I try to let them do their little experiments. This picture, a couple wanted to put up cam lights across the road. And this is the same actually where I got that second attack on the infrasound. But they had actually, I did some call blasting, called them in. This was really strange too. It was the middle of hunting season. We had a lot of smoke out there. There was a forest fire, I think, to the south, and there was a lot of smoky in that area. And I really wasn't expecting anything to happen that night, but they all wanted to go out that night. So there were 7 individuals, and 2 of those were hunters that I had just picked up. We had this. They were found out what we were doing, so they wanted to join in. So I said, okay. So I had plenty of chairs, so we were all sitting out there across the road, and we did some call blasting. And sure enough, about 25 minutes later, we heard some movement coming in. And I don't sit there and constantly call blast. I did a few calls and we wait and see if they come in. And normally, if there's adults come in or whatever, they'll make a bunch of noise. And that's what we experienced. We started hearing a lot of brush movement around us. And as we were sitting there, and we were just sitting there kind of just whispering and everything, talking, we looked across the road there and we see these chem lights moving. And they're playing with these chem lights. I mean, they're banging them and stuff like that. They didn't tear them off and throw them, whatever. But the interesting thing is that we started getting vocalizations where we started hearing like a wounded deer sound, which I never heard before. And I wish I had my recorder going at the time, because I said I would love it, because I've heard that other people talk about this wounded deer sound. I had never heard it before until that night. And we were hearing wounded deer. We were hearing whistling. We heard a couple little knocks, and then we actually heard a male out there vocalize for a real ah sound, and then stop. And this went on for a couple hours. But the whole thing was let people experience that and say, well, okay, this is what, because I don't go out there and tell people what to think. I sit there and say, well, you let me know what you're seeing out there and hearing and what your experience is, because then you can be skeptical or not so skeptical or whatever. You can decide for yourself. I don't tell people what they should. This is what we're dealing with out here.
I think that's...
And they get all excited. I mean, there's really a lot of excitement on our part. And, we get individuals try to walk over to them and say, no, you don't want to do that. And they actually just withdraw. And it kind of ruins it. And what I'm trying to do is I said, just sit there, let the people, everybody experience this, and don't approach them. I'm telling these individuals, don't approach them, because they're just going to withdraw, which they did. And I said, then you can ruin the experience for people. And, trying to get restrain people, I always, when you take people out doing these things, just kind of like, oh, don't do that. I tell people these things, but they want to try to get closer or whatever. But it is ruin their own experience. That's what I say. If you just sit here, let them do the thing, they'll do their little thing, and then they'll leave.
Okay. So you found that the best results of being able to experience things are just sit down or stay in your area and just watch and be quiet.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, but I use some techniques we have, like for call blasting stuff, and we don't do that to try to get vocalization. We basically use that to get them to come in, because they get curious. Doesn't matter how long they'll come in from, a couple miles away. If they hear your vocalizations, they'll come in and see what's going on. That's why we change up our call blasting sometimes on our different vocals to see how they respond to them. If I can get some couple of responses on this, I'll use that next time. But if you use it too many times, they'll stop responding to it.
Yeah, that makes
They're
sense.
smart that way.
Yeah.
They adapt to it. So,
you've taken so many people out to these areas over the years. Can you think of any times where there's been someone has encountered Bigfoot activity for the first time and they've just had a really intense reaction?
Besides my boss.
Yeah, I guess that's probably the king of the reactions, huh? Yeah.
Well, yeah. That we had 10 individuals we took out there, and some of us were 4 individuals, I believe, were researchers, and we had some new people with. We took them out to experience, and they got to hear vocalizations that night, and I thought that was kind of cool. Like I said, sometimes people do the things I don't want them to do. They'll sit there and overstep their bounds, I call it. I should put a stop to it, but what I'm doing is letting people experience certain things. Just let them, whatever, because some people try to turn it into a camp out, and they'll build a fire out there, which I usually don't like have fires out there, because they usually stay away. And but then you get to individuals who want to bring booze along or whatever, and that I don't tolerate. But then they want to drink out there and turn into a drinking party, and I just get really upset. So I just go down to the other end of the camp and just listen to stuff. But as these individuals were drinking all night, and they went back to our rigs, we had 10 vehicles out there. And let's see, we had 4 RVs, a couple of campers, but they were all in general area, this Charlie and everything. But there was a gentleman was sleeping in the back of his truck in the canopy, and they had come back in there. I think it was around 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and I guess they decided it was an adult. I assume it could have been a juvenile, but they decided to shake him awake. And the only reason you know this because we had let the recorder going all night in the camper. We could hear these things come in, and they actually were shaking him. And that was his first experience. And he still talks about it. All he talks about it every time I talk to him, it was his first experience with any kind of Bigfoot activity. But even though he heard the vocalizations and everything that night, but that was the most shocking thing. But that shocked me is that there were so many people in camp. I was surprised that these things come in there. So we learned from that experience, hey, it doesn't matter how many people you have, they'll still come into camp in the middle of the night when they think everybody's asleep.
That is wild. So you're saying they shook the vehicle to get him to wake up?
Yeah. They woke him up. They scared him. That was almost traumatic. Probably the second most traumatic experience. Oh, I had a third one. It was really bad. I have to be careful. I'm a little bit more vetting people now because they don't realize what they're dealing with. They think these creatures stay out there, and they don't. They're like 50 feet away, and you're going to see them. Well, sometimes they come in really, really close. And they they can tear up the brush and stuff. I took one individual out there, and he won't go back out in the woods anymore. Actually, it's the second person out there. But I don't want to give people PTSD. That's what I'm trying to avoid. I try to tell people all the time that, hey, you could experience this out there. It's not like what you think it is. It's easy to talk about it when you're in a lighted room and everything. But when it's completely dark out there, it's a totally different scenario out there. You don't have control of your environment. They do. So you just kind of have to deal with it.
Are you able are you able to share what happened at that time where the individual will not go back into the woods anymore?
Well, the one was the boss, the guy that was leaning over the hood. The other guy was named, I don't want to go into names, but
right, no.
I took him down to Delta, and this is kind of unique because he was in the military, so I kind of like trusted military people, but he was also a combat veteran, and we're a little bit more. I don't know. It takes a lot to really set us off or get us going. And this particular individual was a Vietnam vet. At least he told me he was a combat veteran. But I took him out there, and we were probably out there for 20 minutes. And I did a couple calls, and we were in this brushy area and stuff when we were not too far from the tree shaking area. And we had a big male come in there, and he was it sounded like a bulldozer comes through the brush and everything. And it was just doing some vocalizations, and he just lost it. I mean, one of the few times that I was trying to control people and everything, we actually had to leave 20 minutes after we got there. And I had driving him home, and he was just having a nervous breakdown over it. But this guy was telling me how he was going to spear it in the chest. They talking all this crap, and I was kind of laughing. He was kind of skeptical. And then when I took him out there, he found that, basically, well, we're dealing with real creatures out there. He didn't want no part of that. And like I said, I haven't talked to the individual since I took him home that night, and that was several years ago. He doesn't even want to talk about the incident. He doesn't want to do anything. He doesn't want to, I tried to actually say, well, I'm going to get you to go back out there again, because he said he used to go out in the woods all the time. I says, we'll see if we can get you back through that again. He doesn't want anything to do with the woods whatsoever anymore. So unfortunately, then I feel responsible for that individual because, like I said, I just changed his whole life or thing. But it's getting people, like I says, you don't really realize the realities of what's going on out there. They just take it for granted. And I says, well, but I really feel bad if I get somebody to that point. I don't want, and he's got prior PTSD from the war, so it just makes it worse.
Yeah, that would be a very tricky thing for. I'm trying to put myself in your situation to work through that. That would be. I mean, you can try to prepare these individuals that have asked you to bring them to your area, but I mean, is there a way that you can really prepare them 100%? I don't think there is. We can't understand that until we get there.
Yeah. And even my own research partner, like says, they haven't experienced seeing them, which I have. which I'm a lot more on the cautious side, because every time I have seen them, it just made me more cautious, because then when you actually see them to what you're dealing with out there, it's more like a wake up call. But they always say the same thing. They want to go chasing in the brush after them and stuff like that. And I'm going, no, you sure don't. Because after I used to do a lot of stupid stuff that I call it, where I go in, go in chasing, and I hear sounds and go in there looking and running in there. I won't do that anymore. After seeing them now, I said, there's no way now I'm going to do that. I'm very on the cautious side of doing it now, because these things are so big, and like I says, we're like little twigs to them. They just tear it apart if they want to do that. But it's also because from listening on the recording, I know, what word am I looking for? I basically understand their behavior, but I don't trust them. Still, the more I deal with stuff, and like I says, they're not humans that we're dealing with. They're not going to do any kind of interaction, and we're also invading them. We're still outsiders. People always think they're going to have this interaction or something like it, Jane Goodall or whatever. It's not going to happen. At least I don't think it's going to happen with anybody. Anybody tells me they have this little. I've heard stories. People sit there and tell me this, where they're playing pity pat, out there with them in their sites or whatever, and they're feeding them, and they're having this mental thing or whatever going on. I don't believe that's happening. I don't think it's even possible for what I'm studying out there.
It is very interesting how individuals, if you take their accounts at face value, they are definitely and sometimes experiencing the phenomenon of Bigfoot in extremely different ways. Do you ever have encounters where it feels like you're being watched for just a long period of time when you're in those areas?
I never get that feeling of somebody watching me. I never had that feeling. Now, I've heard people talk about that a lot, and I've always chalked that off to maybe the infrasound, because that's what people get on there, the dread and feeling of being watched. I don't get that feeling out there. I don't know if it could be for my personally. I can't say I don't get scared out there. I get nervous or cautious, but I don't have the fear that goes on with most people, because I know more basic what I'm dealing with out there. I'm expecting it, but it catches me off guard sometimes. But it's for people. I don't know what they're thinking sometimes.
Are the Sierra sounds ever used in your call blasting out there?
I use those. And that was actually when I played that. I've used them one time, and that was when I got that. That maybe be the reason I got infrasound back in return on the second time when I was out there. When I was talking about the cross the road, I was using call blasting out to that area across the road there, the Sierra sound.
Okay.
And that's I kind of got that aggressive response. I don't like to say that's exactly what it was, but I'm always trying to figure out what caused that response to get the infrasound attacks. Like I said, the first time was because I jumped off the RV and running towards creatures. That particular time, I remember using that Sarah sounds, calling into the brush in there, and that's the response I got. So that might have been what it was, or might have wasn't. But I've only heard that samurai chatter out there once in the middle of the night. I heard that samurai chatter type. But all the other stuff, whoops, I've heard before too. So not particularly just like that, but the talking like that, the talking we recorded, it wasn't like that. It was more like a growling. Matter of fact, you have that recording.
I got them both here, Ben. So I'm going to go ahead. Should I play them together or play one and let you do commentary and then the other?
Well, they're both from the same creatures.
Okay.
One's just a longer version of it. One's 1 minute and 52 seconds, and the other one's 38 seconds. We had several other recordings on there. I just sent you a couple of those as examples.
All right, I'm gonna play version 4 first here. Okay, so that's our first one. I'm going to go ahead and play the second one here. All right, Ben. So feel free to.
Yeah, there was a little bit of jet noise in there, and there was also, I think there was a knock in there, but yeah, unfortunately, recorded a jet. It set me a jet coming in the last part of that and everything, so they flying over there. But it's interesting. Like I said, there's growls in that, and there's that's actually the creature come down from the top of the hill, and actually that's when I was talking about the chair incident we were joking about with Chuck. I was talking about that. He was holding a chair and everything. But it was interesting because what caused that response was we had recorded one of our fellow researchers has a newborn. He actually had a baby crying, and we actually did that particular call out there and running that, and that's the response we got. We thought it actually generated a aggressive response, but we thought was kind of weird.
Oh, wow. That's very interesting, Ben. So playing the baby crying noise, an aggressive response. Oh, my goodness. Ooh.
Well, there was also, it could have been something else. We know there's other calls we got out there that there was definitely a juvenile. I had a food station out there that I was trying to draw him to when we were trying to basically get him in that area. And we had heard a juvenile calls earlier from our recordings. And either the juvenile got in between us and the adult, I'm not sure. But like I said, as we played that recording out there, and we instantly started getting calls out from the top of the hill. And he come all the way down there within probably 30, 40 feet away from us, which is unusual for an adult to do that. And he was sitting there getting, this is what he was doing by those sounds. As fellow researchers were saying, it was heavy breathing, but it was definitely growling and making these noises like that. That was the response we got. And that's what caused but like I said, it's always thing we had played out there, call blasting, was the baby cries.
Has there ever been a time when you've been call blasting out there and you did something, you're like, oh man, we should not have done that?
Well, it's besides the infrasound thing I got from Ron Moorhead's Sahara sound, yeah, I would say that one. And I know Ron, it's funny because we talk about that all the time, but it's most of the time I'm testing out there anyway. I don't like doing a lot of predator calls. So my call blast system can do that. It has over 1,000 different calls. Besides, I can put all my stuff on over 200 or 300 different calls I want to. but I try not to call in, do predator calls like rabbits or anything like that, because I'm always afraid it's going to bring predators in, coyotes or cougar or something unexpected. No, we usually try to be very careful in doing that, but I haven't had anything out of the ordinary where we get called by. Most of the time, like I said, we get some weird vocals most of the time. That's what we're trying to generate, or we try to actually use it, because a lot of people think the call busting systems to generate vocalization, but it's not. It's actually just to get them within a certain area to come into an area for their curiosity, for we can get them into our recording range. So that's basically what it's used for. And it doesn't always work. Like I says, sometimes they'll be quiet all the time. They won't respond to it at all. You have to change it up. Like I said, I've tried whale calls out there to see how that works. I've done monkey. I'm trying to howler monkey. Certain monkey sounds they'll respond to and give vocals to, or they'll react to. Sometimes music can cause them to do weird things out there. You hear them start breaking branches if you turn it off. Like they want to hear it, they're real quiet, and then you turn it off, and then they would start breaking branches and getting all upset.
That's really interesting, Ben. That lines up with a few other things I've heard. What kind of music are you playing out there?
Oh, that particular time, we did some Celtic music. It was like Irish music, I guess. It was Celtic, and they seemed to enjoy that. Now, I haven't tried everything in the world, because, like I said, I'm not trying to contaminate their behaviors, because too much influence in us is we're causing reactions. I actually want them to do it on their natural precepts, just to how they naturally work in the environment, calling one another and communication between one another. I'd rather not us interact with them at all or cause them to do these things. I'm just trying to get responses, just their natural behaviors basically comes down to. That's what I'm trying to learn off of.
So something that might be interesting to try. I've heard this from a few researchers, that there is I believe it's a classical song that usually gets a really good response. It's called Bolero. And it has a really interesting drum beat to it.
Oh, with the beating and stuff on it?
Yeah.
Yeah, friends tried to play flute, and some out there with drums. They said they've gotten responses. I don't play too much on drumming things, because I don't do a lot of knocking, because their communication and knocking is basically for several reasons, but it kind of counteracts what I'm doing. But if you're experimenting, I'm going to actually find that one, and I'll play that out there just to see what kind of reactions I get. But yeah, any kind of drum beats or something like they kind of. It's off and on. I can't always say everything's a response, but like I said, you get a lot of nothing out there too. They won't respond to anything.
Oh, I'm sure that you're out there sometimes, and it's just, it could probably be a few hours that stuff doesn't happen.
Yeah, well, I usually go to bed, because, like I says, just let the equipment do it, because you'll be out. So, like I says, it's so hit and miss when it comes to stuff. Sometimes, they'll be there the whole time. I not even know it. And I get surprised when I go to bed and I realize I hear all this stuff going on after I went to sleep. As soon as the minute I shut the RV door, they're doing all kinds of stuff. One of these knocks I sent you, we said we're out there for 10 hours, didn't even hear a stick break. And all of a sudden, like, all hell broke loose when I went to bed. They're out there knocking a storm, and they're just running all through the brush and everything. It's just weird, And we were out there the whole time and never heard a thing. And going through the brush, it was just quiet out there. And I thought, wow. I always sit there and say, oh, maybe they're not around, but the videos, the recordings tell you differently. I think you did a couple, because there was a shotgun knock. I was telling people because that's a very unusual knock.
Yep.
Because not people catch that, and it says you get the typical knocks where it sounds like something chopping wood on a tree, or I think you played rock clacks too. But I put things that are unusual for people that, for like the mimicking. I wanted them to hear that, where it's mimicking. You can see actually residenting in the owl calls that it's not a fluent like a regular owl. You can actually hear the difference. It almost sounds like a guy at the end going, but there's also two Bigfoots, and there's also a juvenile in that also. And I think it's in the Late Night Visitor. I don't think you played that one. But that's mimicking. You can tell some of the mimicking on there where they get a little bit off is probably a younger adult doing it.
You did say a little bit ago where certain ape calls have elicited responses.
Howler monkey.
Howler monkeys, okay.
And the one that does the most is actually Gibbon. Gibbon. That one has generated a lot of responses.
Wow, that makes total sense, Ben, because when I'm talking to witnesses, a lot of times they will say, yeah, it sounded like a howler monkey or it sounded like a gibbon. I mean, yeah, it makes sense that those would be the
Gibbons
ones.
have got such a high frequency. They go for high and low, which is really unique for those. And they'll get some where you get your ears to ringing when I'm out there on my call blasting. And it's a really high pitched screams. So maybe that's what they're responding to.
I would say absolutely. Sometimes people will say that they hear sounds they try to describe as maybe an elephant or a T-Rex or just stuff that really wouldn't fit in the environment. Have you ever experienced anything like that out there?
In their calls or?
Yeah, in their calls.
No, no, but I do know, I can say there's other wildlife out there that you got to really be careful. Like elk, we were really surprised last year that there was an elk that made 5 different calls that we didn't know it could do. Besides the huffing and stuff, we know they can do that. But it's on a dog, a canine. I actually had that recorded. That's more interesting stuff to say. Like says, everything isn't Bigfoot out there, but it's canine. Some of the calls were grunts that sounded like knocks. It was really impressive. I actually had to go see what the creature was. I actually got out there with thermometer and seen it to see what was making those sounds, and it was a calf elk that was making that sound.
Oh, that's interesting. Wow.
So you also people have to be. That's one of the, like I said, there's a few times like you said, you really have to be on top of your stuff to make sure. If I would have left that night, I mean, it was so aggressive. It would sound like, because every time we call bus, this thing would just go off, and if we made any kind of sounds, it sounded like some kind of aggressive response. So we had heard this over a couple hours, so we decided to go down there and check it out. So we actually went down in there, went out in the field and seen it doing it, and come to find out it was the calf elk doing that calls. I would, if we hadn't pursued to see what it was, might have said that was a Bigfoot, because there were so many. It didn't do any calls as a elk, none whatsoever. But there were so many different calls on there, it just amazed me. But as to them, now in the mimicking things, like I said, we've heard some weird calls out there. I don't know if that's what you're saying. I've never heard those vocals out there before. It amazes me that they can make deer wounding sounds. I never heard a wounded deer before, except for that. And I've heard that many people saying that was Bigfoot related. They've heard that sound. It wasn't until I actually heard it that I said, "Oh, that's what a sound wounded deer sounds like." It actually sounds like that. And I haven't been able to match up any of those recordings, Macaulay Library, or anything like that on these wounded deer. Get anything close. It's really unique hearing these things.
One that I just remembered, this is kind of a weird one, but so Charlie has a logging road that's really close to it, right?
They all do. All the sites do. They all have access to them. They all have a road that goes where you have access to them. These are the easiest sites, the best places to go, because like I says, for Bigfoot activity.
Absolutely.
But anyway, go ahead.
Has there ever been a situation where, let's say you and your team are out there and stuff is just happening, and then all of a sudden, like a random person shows up out of nowhere in the middle of it?
Yeah, there was a time when there was one of our researchers' wives was out there. She said she seen somebody out there, a guy with a backpack, and I thought that was kind of. And it was later in the evening and everything, and I said, and there was nobody out there. And she said she physically saw, but I had no reason to think she was not telling the truth. Just when we went out there and searched and everything, and I said, "Where'd this guy go?" He couldn't have went anywhere because the roads are right there. You would have been able to see him, and it was within 15, 20 seconds since she supposedly saw him because she actually screamed because it scared her. So we ran down there, and she said there was a guy right there. He went that way, and there was nobody there. So I don't know to tell you. But it wasn't Bigfoot. You didn't see Bigfoot.
Absolutely.
I've had some weird people tell me stuff out there. Had some paranormal crap, but it was nothing to do with Bigfoot.
Oh,
so I don't want
really?
people to think I'm crazy either. Yeah.
Well, you know, I think you can I get it, but so are we talking like people are seeing lights out there or what kind of stuff?
I've never seen orbs. I've never seen lights. None of my members, most of the people with me have never seen the same things. I'm just saying we've never seen any lights. The stuff that are being claimed about orbs, I've never seen orbs. I don't even know what the orb would look like. It said all these years. We haven't had anything paranormal as to Bigfoot out there. Now, I've had some strangeness where I've had, I don't really want to go in that because it gets out of control because then people say, well, yeah, it's definitely Bigfoot, but no lights, no orbs or anything like that. Entities, yeah, maybe some weird ghost-like stuff goes on out there, I would say, but it's not Bigfoot.
Oh, wow. And you mentioned something.
There's other things. I always say there's other things in the woods, but I'm not going to go, but that has nothing to do with Bigfoot. I says they had nothing to do. It's totally different things. Well, and I'm more skeptical part of that, the things I see in here, because I can't trust everything I hear all the time either. So,
well, the interesting thing you mentioned at the beginning when you were talking about infrasound is that you were saying that sometimes when you're hit with infrasound, it can actually affect what you're seeing
and hearing.
Oh man.
It can cause you to see apparitions. If, like I says, I always tell everybody to look up on infrasound and everything. Now, I can't safely say completely that these creatures doing it. I'm just relating the incidents that happened to me that maybe suspect this is going on. I'm still collecting information on that just to make sure. But like I said, I've only had one other individual where he says he thought he was mind speaking, but he brought that before. You know, he had that mentality before I met him. So, but he's actually a smart individual. I have no reason to think he's lying or wants to make up stuff like that. So, like I said, unless I really witness stuff for myself, I have a tendency to just put it off until, you know, I have something delayed in here that I can write about. We put down our logs because we have research logs about any kind of stuff that happens to out there, smells. Now I've had a couple instances where something pretty smelly out there. And had some knocking go with it. So I wouldn't always say that was all Bigfoot, but I says that was the worst smell I ever ran across. It smelled like garbage, sewer, and something rotten all together. And it was so bad, it's just like you walked into it and you could walk out of it.
Oh, wow.
It was just, I thought I had stepped into something and started smelling my clothes and everything. Man, this stuff is going to stink on me. But it's that picture doesn't smell. It was just terrible. Make your eyes water.
My goodness.
And twice we had that. Or you can actually walk into it and then come back to area and nothing there. And the same thing when we believe that the females, now this is speculation, is will smell lilac out there. It just really heavy smells of that. It doesn't smell bad. It just smells nice, but it's like a lilac smell, and there's no lilacs out there.
Okay. Now that's weird. Yeah. Huh.
But when the male's around, I said when the adult male's around, it might be. Like I said, twice we smelled that. Other than that, all the 50, I've never smelled anything, even close proximity. But these were really bad smells, and that's the only thing I can relate people were talking about before about these smells. But it will make your eyes water, and it doesn't smell very good at all. But like I said, the lilac smells pretty good out there. It smells like somebody powdering herself with flowers. And like I said, we don't know where that smell comes from either. There's no plant that I know that puts that smell off out there.
You know, I hear the garbage I hear about the garbage smell all the time, but the lilac thing you just mentioned, that's a new one. I'd be interested if other people have heard that as well or smelled that.
Yeah, there's like I said, that's the only smells in there. You get your other smells out. You rotting animal, there's one nearby or whatever. I
Mhm.
mean, Morse got lots of different smells in pine and whatever, cedar. Uh, but when you get smell like that, it really knows. But I mean, sometimes I can smell, during hunting season or something, I can tell when a hunter was in the area. I can smell his old spice aftershave. So the guy must have been putting it on. I said, I don't know how he's doing any kind of hunting. Is we can walk in there and smell his old spice.
Mm.
So definitely humans do put off smells. So the people who research together, I wouldn't always say mask is, putting on any kind of scent maskers or anything like that. And if you're doing Bigfoot research, it's not going to matter. Like I said, they seem, I smoke, they smell that all the time. And I've heard so many different stories. Oh, if you smoke, they won't come in. No, that's not true. So I always just tell people to be normal. You can wear your normal clothes. We wear a lot of camouflage, but we don't have to. They know you're there, so.
Right, exactly. I mean, it for a few reasons. I mean, especially if you're driving RVs in there. I mean, everything in the forest is definitely going to know, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
yeah.
they always seem to be there. Like I said, sometimes when you least expect it, I've been fooled numerous times, and like I says, not even know they were there. They've been observing me the whole time. Most of the night, didn't even know it. They never made a sound. Until, like I said, after late night that you even hear them moving around and stuff. But they were sitting in a spot all the time. We've had people they're whistling. They do like human whistles, and they mimic our whistles a lot. And we've heard that out there many times too. And we know there's no other humans out there.
Right.
Because most of the time, when also I can hear everything within miles. If a car drives in or people are camping over in a certain area, those parabolics will pick that up. We can hear any kind of traffic coming in and out. So we'll know if there's humans out there in the area. And usually, if I have any kind of humans and everything, I just trash the audio anyway. Because if there's knocking going, it could be somebody over there chopping wood for their fire or whatever, or any kind of weird sounds. We assume it's coming from that camp. So you have hours to take audio, you just trash.
Oh wow.
Because, like I said, we're trying not to fool ourselves, regardless. I don't want to sit there and listen after the night and then find out it was a guy and his wife having an argument down the road or whatever. So if there's any kind of human contamination in our audios, I trash them.
It's good that you put yourself to that level of yeah, I mean that's another whole different level that I don't think a lot of other researchers are doing, at least that I've heard. But yeah, that's even better. But
Like I said, it's for us. We're doing the answers for ourselves.
right.
So I don't want to fool myself and contaminate myself. I mean, I've done it. I sit there and listen to stuff most night. But especially if you're listening to audio and you basically went backwards and forwards, because I always do like a real quick skim of it. Because I look for, I don't like a little graph or whatever. And I'll miss stuff. I'll hear like a good example is I heard all this pounding on the gate and everything, and I got all excited, everything listened on there, and come to find out somebody had drove it in during this jet noise. I didn't hear them drive up to the gate, and they were actually unlocking the gate, and somebody was cutting the lock off a gate.
Oh man.
And that was going on for 25 minutes. And then you get mad. I listened to that for 25 minutes and realized that, hey, it was a guy in there, a human. But sometimes people can, a jet noise is a good example. A lot of stuff can move in there. I'll have a lot of good audios, and a jet will fly through there and just wash all that out. And then you catch like the ends of it, like that. When the jets come in there, it kind of just floods out everything. You can't everything on jet noise. But like I said, human people can come in there and their jet noise, and we're right there. I would say almost at the end of a flight pattern for Seattle. Is their takeoff from 7 p.m. to about 10:30? It's like every 20 minutes the jets are going off. You can hear the jets flying there, and it just washes it out. So we're listening more to stuff at night, from 10:30 on after dark, and late morning stuff when it gets really super quiet, and then you can hear a lot more stuff going on that way. But I hear stuff during the day sometimes I didn't realize, movements when I set my farms out there. Sometimes when I walk to the site, I'll just dump equipment, I call it. and I'll leave it overnight and come back pick up it in the morning. But I've set stuff in there pitch black at night, probably midnight or whatever. And as I'm walking off, I'm hearing something walk up to my parabolic at the same time.
No way.
And we always thought, yeah, I've heard that many times. I sit there and go, wow, did he know something was there? Or as we walk towards it, to pick it up in the night or sometimes in the early morning, you can hear a creature just had stepped off the road into the brush. He's been there playing there for several hours. You didn't know it because we don't know it when we walk up there. And he's just a few feet away.
Ugh.
Wow. Yeah, it was dark out there. And I do this stuff by myself all the time. And as a matter of fact, I had that happen last year. I set the thing and walked. I probably got 20, 25 feet. I set my parabolic there, and all of a sudden it got hit by a rock. And it was pitch black out there. And I said, it nailed it, this dead center on my parabolic. Knocked it over. I had to go back and pick it up. But I heard that.
Oh, my goodness.
I go, wow.
Wow.
But they're very good. Like you said, shows that they have night vision really well because, like I said, they can pick up their targets really well, even at night with rocks.
Well, man, Ben, it's fascinating stuff. I mean, these areas that you guys are looking into is just wild. And I want to say, thank you so much for coming back on the show again. It was really fun chatting with you again about what you're experiencing in that area. Did you have any final thoughts before we wind down for the episode?
I just want people to be careful out there when they're researching. Is like I says, don't take everything for granted as Bigfoot. There's other creatures out there that will. I mean, there's bears, and just always on the verge of caution or whatever. I said, people really. I know people like to get that experience or whatever, but don't get yourself hurt doing it. But like I said, these guys are not always friendly either. So. And very seldom friendly because people like to call them little forest friends and stuff like that. And from my experience in their behavior, they're not like that at all. So they kind of want to be left alone, especially the adults. And if you get the chance to do see one, it's great. But like I said, it may be closer than you think. So other than that, I just want people to be safe when they're out there doing this stuff. Like I says, when I'm doing this like I said, we're doing it for our own answers. We don't try to sit there and try to say it exists, and you shouldn't try to push my thoughts or my beliefs on somebody else either. So let people experience for themselves and they make their own decisions.
Absolutely. Guys, you can follow along with what Bigfoot Ops is doing on their Facebook page. I'll have that linked in the description or show notes for this episode so people can check that out.
There's some of my other experiences on there too. They can see like the other sightings I've had. So, and I have descriptions of the creatures and all that kind of good stuff for them.
Well, there you go. Yeah. Thank you again for coming on the show, Ben.
Thank you, Jeremiah, for having me. I mean, if I ever find something else, I'll let you know again. I'll give you a call. Thank you,
sir.
So appreciate it. All right. It's great talking to you. Thank you.
Just want to take a few minutes to say thank you to you, all my listeners, for listening to the podcast. Please take a minute to help out the show by subscribing on YouTube, making sure you hit the bell so you don't miss any notifications, and share the episode on YouTube with a friend. Also, if you're listening to us on a podcast, thank you so much. Make sure that you're subscribed, share the show with a friend. Really, it's all about sharing the show wherever you can. If you've had a Bigfoot encounter related to the following or know someone who has, please reach out to me at bigfootsociety@gmail.com or pass on my email. Here's a list: the Subtle Lake area of Oregon, Rainbow, Oregon, McKinsey Bridge area, Sweet Home, pretty much that entire area, the north part, if you get what I mean. I'll see you back next time, listeners. Sasquatch Summerfest this year, July 11th through the 12th. It's going to be fantastic. July 11th through 12th in Green Waters Park in Oak Ridge, Oregon. And listeners, if you're going to go, you can get a 2-day ticket for the cost of one. If you use the code BFS, like Bigfoot Society, but BFS, and it'll get you some off your cost. Priscilla was nice enough to provide that for my listeners. So there you go. I look forward to seeing you there. So make sure you head over to www.sasquatchsummerfest.com and pick up your tickets today.